Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today's November 23, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his outstanding podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with David Orban for part two. Where in the heck you calling in from, David?
I'm in Italy. When you see these books behind my back, it's in my home near Lake Como in the north of Italy.
How cool is that? It's a real honor and a pleasure to be here with you again. Part one was December 15th of last year. And let's just jump into your pursuits as an author. What was the tipping point? And a couple of the things you might repeat from part one, no worries. But I mean, you're studying what in high school and college, and where are you? That's my calling to be an author.
Um, I always looked at technology and how it impacts society. As a matter of fact, how it defines how to be human. And eh, I always published little essays and spoke at conferences, developed various metaphors or analogies that, in my opinion, made sense and that had a good reaction from my audience. And so a friend who was curating a series of books with a publisher told me, hey, why don't you write a book about this? And I did.
So this is yeah. So the author is post you becoming a public speaker. I mean, is your first calling or your first sort of career not being an author? What was your first career? What did you study in high school and college?
I went to a high school that privileged scientific education, STEM, and I studied physics in college without graduating. My first job was as an AI developer, using uh, a couple of languages that today are close to extinct, called Lisp and Prolog. And then I um, left that job pretty early, and I became an entrepreneur. I built my own companies and scaled them in various areas: speech recognition, online video, Internet of Things, and these are all mixing, is if you wish, technology with how it hopefully has a positive impact on humanity.
Wow, that's really well articulate. You're concise. I appreciate it. But let's go back. What was the tipping point for you to pursue physics when you first started to study? You know, why did you go to physics? What was the in science? You sort of said scientific and physics. What was that tipping point in your early in your career?
My favorite book in kindergarten was The Adventures of a Carbon Atom.
Yeah.
At the time, I was in Hungary, and it is a Hungarian book, but fun enough, uh, 50 years later or more, you can still find it in an English edition too. It was a very successful book. And I remember leafing through the pages and looking at how this carbon atom would become a dinosaur, and then a leaf, and then petroleum, and then help baking bread, and all the things that adults knew carbon atoms were for, and it was absolutely fascinating. And my father would tell me about the stars and black holes, and gracefully lie to me when I asked, but if a star explodes and its radiation could hurt us, how will we find out beforehand? And he would say, well, but with our telescopes, we would see, and then we could take precautions, which obviously is not true, because by the time you see it, that is when it gets to you. So, but but parents are known to tell tales to children that, in their opinion, are necessarily protective until they grow up.
Yeah.
So but what is funny about all of this is that my father was an actor, my mother is a painter, and they are or were pretty adamant about the fact that they wanted me to have nothing to do with an artistic career.
Wow.
Evidently, they were um, inspired and talented and couldn't stop themselves from doing what they did, but at the same time, they were also frustrated and felt that if they wanted me to be happy in my life, I should do something different from what they did.
Oh, that David, it's leading so perfectly into our discussion, but a couple little things there. So then once you pursued AI developing and then you became an entrepreneur, what year was your first book come out? What age and what year did it come out?
Oh, much later. I built my first businesses in the late '80s, early '90s,
Yeah.
and I published my first book merely 10 years ago. So
So 2010-ish is your book.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So
Okay.
so a long time, and that is why what I'm saying is, for me, communicating has always been
Yeah.
something that I enjoyed and I understood to be part of my responsibility, either as a potential scientist, or as an entrepreneur, as a business leader. And so I very happily did that, writing and publishing and speaking. But in terms of putting together a book, that came at the prodding of this friend, and I wrote the book pretty fast. I would say 90% of the book was written in 2 weeks in Cuba.
Right. So basically, you're a communicator and you're listed as a visionary and a futurist.
Well, those are labels that people like to use, and
Well,
I
what's one label if you were at a party and we met, I go, "What do you do, David?" What would you say in one or two words?
well, professionally, I would say I'm an entrepreneur and an investor.
Investor. Okay, that's good. Now let's go with that. A screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. The art of investing and being an entrepreneur. What role does intention play in your creative process?
And what we always look at is the importance of an ambitious vision and the ability to execute on that vision, regardless of how fraught and variable, uncertain, risky the path is,
Yeah,
leading from the starting point to the end point. You have to keep your eye on the vision, and then especially in modern ways that startups are built, you have to iterate rapidly in order to find out what works. Because there is no given single recipe that you can apply, there is no
yeah,
checklist that you can be sure of, unless you are copying someone else's work, unless you are not adding anything of value. If
Yeah,
you are building something that is novel, then it is a true act of creation. And as such, you are opening your own path towards success.
beautiful. Marcel Duchamp says there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your client when you're approaching them or communicating with them?
And there are two very different categories, if not more, but let's look at just two of products and services. One that indeed needs to immediately start communicating about itself with the potential customers and incorporate their feedback and constantly measure their level of satisfaction and improve through the iterative process on what you offer them. But there are incredibly successful and inspiring examples of products that uh, develop a completely novel market and a need that didn't exist before.
Yeah,
If you asked in the 1800s a farmer what he would need in order to be more effective in his work on planting and growing and collecting and then bringing to the market his produce, he would not be able to answer, "Oh, I would love to have a combine."
yeah.
That is that it is completely out of
Right,
his reality.
right.
Another very famous example is the iPhone. Steve Jobs did not do focus groups asking the users what they thought of smartphones and
Yeah,
what they thought of apps and what they thought of the ability to do things on their phone before the iPhone existed, because they wouldn't have been able to answer, or
yeah.
the answers that he got would have been useless. So these two categories are both valid, and it is important to understand um your idea, whether it belongs to the one or the other, and then act accordingly. And I think this is true in many other endeavors. And it is exciting, humbling, and also frightening to have one of those ideas where you know you are truly opening a new space of interaction, a new way of looking at things.
Well done, because it really reminded me of two um aphorisms that I've learned through studying advertising and Marshall McLuhan. One is create the disease and offer the cure, and the other one is sell the sizzle, not the steak. But I'm not trying to put a wrench in what you were saying, because I think what you were saying has a positiveness and you're trying to make the world a better place. And that's what we're after. So McLuhan said that everything we invent extends some humanness. Knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera extends our eyelid, and maybe non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. I think one of your major tools, and you can tell me if it's not, one of your major tools is language. What does language extend? What humanness?
The ability to communicate at the degree that we do is uniquely human, even though other animals communicate in their own ways. Um, Clearly, we belong to a completely different category. And for me, language is a beautiful tool that is the equivalent of the humus, the vital foundation upon which life thrives in the world of ideas. Without language, ideas cannot healthily grow, even though you can be a genius if for your circumstances you are a shepherd, and you are done with your day's work and you are laying on your back in a beautiful summer night on the top of the mountain with your herd safe, locked away, and your dog is laying on your side, and you look at the stars. I am sure that you can imagine the exhilarating uh, knowledge and beauty that lies in the sky, ready to be discovered. And you turn around, look at the dog, and you completely understand the dog completely understands you. Both of you use around 400 words, and you have absolutely no way of expressing that yearning because you don't have the vocabulary, you don't have the ability to communicate it. So, in that sense, language creates bridges not only among and between humans, but also uh, with the world, that through language we imagine, we explore, and ultimately we reach.
Beautiful. And you almost reminded me of reading The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho years ago. That's sort of like that alchemy in what's the difference between art and science?
Uh, Much less than people claim and are proud to pretend they understand. Both are supremely creative endeavors. Both require a lot of effort and discipline. Both are, in any moment in time, the consequence of many generations of artists or scientists that came before and that inspire and uh, support and push forward those that come after them, making possible their activities. And so, in that sense, it is, for me, frustrating that there are people who don't understand how closely these two fields are related. Uh, Umberto Eco, the Italian semiologist, wrote The Name of the Rose, that became also a successful movie with Sean Connery, and more recently a television series. And in The Name of the Rose, spoiler alert, he hypothesizes that there are lost Aristotelian uh, works that are preserved in this medieval monastery that refute that division of the world that supposedly um, uh, were needed in order for the ideas of the age to create order. And these books are too modern, not only for the ancient Greeks, but they are too modern for that Middle Age. In the story, the entire monastery at the end goes up in flames, again losing the books to them and to us. But of course, in the novel, as well as in the movie, you end up understanding that those ideas may be too modern for us too,
Yeah.
as they try to come to a synthesis of how we want to explore and understand the world. Art and science are two ways, but they are not in contrast. They very strongly complement and support each other.
Yeah, because I mean, your parents being more artists and you being more scientists, there's so much crossover. Because here's Jean Cocteau. I'm curious, I'm going to just read a couple quotes about science and love to hear your reactions. Here's the first one. Jean Cocteau: art is science made clear.
Mhm. Um, well, I love it when I see um, a job description at NASA or the European Space Agency or at CERN. They want to hire artists in residence. They understand
Yeah.
that they need those people that are inspired by the scientists' work, and they can uh, represent them in ways that speak deeply to a large public that otherwise they wouldn't be able to reach.
Yeah, that's I heard you tell me that if this is true or reeks of any uh truth to you. When coding first started, IBM or Bell Labs went to artists and say, "Hey, help us write code," and they did. And they went to experimental filmmakers like Stan Vanderbeek, and then eventually Laurie Anderson, blah blah blah. And then coding became more of a fashionable trade. And now code was really cool then. Now it sucks because coders write code. Any truth to that?
And artists saw computers right away as a new uh, means for self expression.
Yeah.
And they were excited to experiment with all kinds of media, whether they were ASCII art of dot matrix printers that could only type letters,
Yeah.
whatever crude image would come out of the printer, and you would be proud of it, whether it would be the um, origins of what today we call generative art,
Yeah.
that already various procedures would create without today's ability to follow the instructions so precisely. And I think one of the best examples of this intermingling of art and science is the Mandelbrot set,
Yeah.
this beautiful image that in the 80s exploded in the global consciousness because of how intricate and deep it was, literally deep, in the sense that it originated from a simple mathematical equation, and you could explore it in its fractal beauty, in elegant formations that would never repeat, always different. And that is, I think, still today one of the best examples of how art, science, and pure mathematics are able to reinforce each other.
Great word. Reinforce each other. Here's McLuhan. When we push our paradigms back, we get history. When we push them forward, we get science.
Um, Paradigms, in my view, are a lens for interpreting reality.
Yeah.
And history um, must be understood in every form, whether it is the history of human civilization, or whether it is the history of biological species, whether it is the history of our 13.8 billion years of the universe as we understand it today. And when we look into the unknown, we can ask ourselves whether the paradigms that we use serve us well. And we have to have the courage to discard them and build new ones. And famously, that is what Einstein did when no one was able to give a physical interpretation of certain mathematical results that were already available to everyone, but only Einstein was courageous enough to question fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. And only that courage enabled him to then go back and say, all right, if we don't assume that space and time are absolute, what is the consequence in light of those mathematical results, as well as some potential experiments? And formulating it, he was able to inspire others to go out and carry out the experiments. And now our complete view of the world changed as a consequence. Now, importantly, if you don't mind, uh, there can be pretty important mistakes that are made in the name of language, in the name of interpreting new paradigms with an excessive degree of simplicity as well as fundamentalism. Because, yes, we call it the theory of relativity.
Yeah.
But from there to go and say, oh, everything is relative, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have scientific power of explanation. It doesn't create a new world, uh, or even more perniciously, if quantum mechanics has proven that there are profound um, new discoveries that we were able to make and still need to complete about the nature of what it means for an object to even exist, because sometimes during our experiments objects behave as they were particles and other times as they were waves,
Yeah.
and this is absolutely counterintuitive. Well, postmodernism doesn't follow. It's not that as a consequence you are uh, empowered, encouraged, and supported by science to spew gibberish, and make everyone uncomfortable in the process.
Yeah. Boy, so much packed in there, David. You're inspiring to me because first of all, talk about gibberish. James Joyce, the king of gibberish, Finnegan's Wake, said mistakes are portals to discovery, or they can be a port, like you said, important mistakes. They can be portals to discovery. And Frank Zappa loved to quote the word wavicle, which it's a combination of the particle and the wave. He didn't invent it, but he used that word wavicle. But you were talking about courage. So let's go on with these science quotes. And I have one from Einstein. But first, what does courage mean to you now?
Um, People look at you as you age, and you and I are of a certain age, that makes you or puts you in a position of supposed uh, authority. And I think it is an important, especially today, important act of courage to refuse that, to say, I don't deserve, just because I am older, just because I have had certain experiences in times of rapid change, in times where we have to question assumptions. I must be fighting with you side by side in order to receive the acknowledgement of our results rather than receiving them without having fought for them. And for me, that is an important act of courage, of taking off the crown, of getting your hands dirty, of starting from scratch at the same level as everyone else, regardless of their biological age, side by side. And I hope to live that courage.
Beautiful. As Marshall said so brilliantly, the future ain't what it used to be. So here is the Einstein quote, David. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science.
Well, the way I interpret that quote is that pushing the boundaries necessarily uh, means that we look at what we don't understand.
Yeah.
And then, whether we are artists or scientists, we try to penetrate that, we try to illuminate it, and gain the enlightenment as a consequence, to be able to strive for more. It is a never-ending quest, by the way. There is no danger of art or science being ever done. There will be no Thursday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon where all over the world, artists and scientists will put down their pencils or brushes or whatever they do and say, okay, we are done. We can all go home. It is never going to happen. There will be millions or billions of years, and we will always find new ways to discover mysteries. And then, of course, we can ask ourselves, have they been there already? Or are we even creating the mystery? Are we generating the path that no one has trodden before? If it has never been discovered before, are we the creators of those new of new ways of looking at the world? And it's part of the fun, for sure, at least for me.
Do you think that that word enlightenment is that different from what your parents strove for enlightenment in the arts and you strive for enlightenment, say, in science? It's pretty much the same enlightenment in the long run, or is it vastly different?
So the reason I use that word is on purpose, because it is strongly associated with humanism, and with the belief that we are endowed with abilities to understand and to act, and we are proud of those abilities. And it doesn't matter how imperfect we are, as well as our creations, as we understand the universe more and more, we can increase our ambitions, whether
Yeah.
they are artistic or scientific or
Yeah.
societal. And so the light of knowledge that meets the mysteries of the universe, they coexist, they push, they fight, they dance, and the opposite of that is static, boring dogmatism, where the belief is that we know everything, that every answer has been given, that there is nothing else to discover, and questions are a nuisance. And I hope that this way of looking at the world, where questions and the ability to ask ever more arrogant questions, disrespectful questions, provocative questions is a view that is shared by more and more people.
Yeah, that's you evoked two ones, two there, David. Auden, the poet, said the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. So that's back to that mystery. He uses that word mystery. You use mysterious, but I'm curious the difference between mysterious and magic. Because here's the quote on science and your field, technology, by Arthur Clarke, 2001. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Well, that is Clarke's third law. The first two are the first is about again authority, because he says when a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he's almost certainly right. When he states that something is impossible, he's very probably wrong. And so he says, just because he's distinguished and elderly, don't obey him when he says you shouldn't explore that direction. You should. You should. That is your alarm bell. That is exactly where you should go. And the
Right.
second is the only way of discovering the limits of the possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible, right? Where he says we cannot be content with what we already know. We have to step over into the uncertain and the unknown. And by definition, for everyone else, that is too easy to label and call it impossible.
Yeah.
Now, the third law that you quoted, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, is the world that we are living today.
Yeah.
Because there are advancements that the vast majority of the people haven't experienced yet, that are already changing the world, and they haven't even had the time to get accustomed with those advancements. And what the consequence of that is that the reality runs the risk of fragmenting around them. Their ability to grasp cause and effect it becomes brittle, and the tools that they used in order to know that they understood what was going on become unavailable or insufficient. And we have to, by we, I mean those of us who care about maintaining a cohesive vision of the world by everyone around us, we have the responsibility of accelerating the use of the tools that make it possible to reinforce this vision of reality, this reading of reality, the ability to interpret reality. Otherwise, we are back to uh, superstition. When the ancient Greeks said Zeus in his chariot is going across the sky, they were creating beautiful mythology that had very little power to improve their own lives. And it took us thousands of years to build a scaffolding where what we say, the language we use, and the consequences of that language could actually improve the lives of people. So we have to be careful in maintaining that. We have to be careful not to go back to a superstitious interpretation of the world where an aeroplane is impossible to understand, or a robot that speaks to you is impossible to understand, or a human that is maybe not of a human form anymore is impossible to understand.
Yeah, like one of Marshall's favorites was Zeus said to Narcissus, "Be careful, watch yourself." You but it's like, the purpose of aphorisms, David, in my opinion, and you do this well, is yeah, you might have an insight or it's a good thought or strong challenge to think something new. But I think the purpose of aphorisms is to reword them and reinvent them. So here's a couple reinvention of Arthur C. Clarke's first law. This is Warren Ellis. Any sufficiently advanced civilization is indistinguishable from its nature.
Yeah, I so one of the biggest question we have uh, unanswered is whether um, advanced alien technological civilizations exist and whether we will be ever able to communicate with them. And the formal name of this question is the Fermi paradox.
Yeah.
Supposedly, Enrico Fermi, the physicist, was asking himself this. And the way I imagine him is standing in the beautiful night sky of the New Mexico desert, smoking together with Oppenheimer as they are taking a break during the Manhattan Project. And Fermi says, "Dove cazzo sono tutti quanti?" And Oppenheimer says, what did you say? Oh, sorry. I was just saying in Italian, where the fuck is everyone? Looking at the stars. And I don't know if that is the way it went, but um, everything we do is done at a level of efficiency, and the inefficiency is what we today call, for example, pollution, or we call cities, or we call uh, lights in the night. Because if we were able to advance, and we are advancing more and more, the pollution would be reduced, cities would be just like forests or gardens, and the light would be exactly proportional to what we need rather than, just going out in the world. And, and so based on that, if we extrapolate, it can be assumed that a very advanced civilization cannot be, you cannot point your telescope and say, oh, look at that. They are doing so many things, so big, so bright, so transformative. No, maybe you are pointing your telescope to a civilization, but it is invisible exactly because how advanced it is. And one of the reasons why we urgently need to understand the answer to this question is because the responsibility we have on our shoulders is just too big. If the universe in 13.8 billion years was able to produce one technological civilization, one species that is conscious and sentient and self-aware, and is able to produce beauty and art and science and yearn for more, and we fuck it up, then who knows how many billions of years will be needed until there is another chance for someone like us to go on a quest to wake up the universe.
Wow, let's think positive and move forward. But here's one more with very good, David. That's brilliant what you said. I appreciate it. And this is one more rewording of Arthur Clarke's first law. And this is Bruce Sterling. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from its garbage.
So Bruce is a friend, and I knew it would be something like that. I was mentally completing the sentence, and rather than garbage, I was saying the word crap. So he is, of course, a provocateur, and he likes to be a contrarian, a curmudgeon in many ways. Um, which is very, very helpful when you write the way he writes, entertaining, interesting, intriguing novels. I am looking forward for more from him, because he hasn't published sci-fi, at least for some time. One of the important contributions that Bruce gave us is the concept of spime. And spimes are units in the Internet of Things, uh, connected objects that are uh, endowed of so many different sensors. They know where they are located. They are able to perceive the world in many useful ways. Um, a simple embodiment of a spime is our phone.
Yeah,
However, uh, our current generations of the Internet of Things, as it is spreading necessarily in the world, uh, making the world magic in its wake, uh, are running the risk of creating garbage. Exactly like he says, because as they die, well, as long as it is a phone, we toss it in a wherever on our desk, or in a box, and in a drawer, and then sooner or later, hopefully, we bring it to be recycled. That's fine. But imagine that rather than having hundreds of millions, we have hundreds of billions
yeah.
of smaller dust-like things like that. And that is where, just like in the previous exchange we have just had, what we need is to rethink how the world is, to make it as gracefully able to degrade as the biological world.
Yeah.
If we wouldn't be able to recycle, we would be swimming in skin flakes. The reason we are not doing that is because everything biological knows how to die well, knows how to stop and destroy itself, at least in its constituent parts that can be helpfully recycled. And we have to learn in a very, very deep way how to do the same with our technological world.
You touched on this a few moments ago, and I have to insert it because this is Niels Bohr. The opposite of a fact is a falsehood, but the opposite of a profound truth may be another profound truth.
Um, I don't know the context that led Niels Bohr
Yeah,
make that statement. It could very well be uh, his conversations, very um, friendly, but also intense fights together with fellow physicists that they had in order to understand the implications, uh, physical, mathematical, scientific, logical, but even philosophical, existential, of quantum mechanics. And we are still doing that. How we combine logical components as that statement. What is the opposite of a fact? It is a non fact.
yeah,
But is a truth when we take it and we look at the opposite of that truth? Could that also be true? Well, definitely in quantum mechanics, that is possible. And we are now living in a world where we have uh, daily experiences with those. As an example, the global positioning system that we use in our phones to navigate from one place to another makes corrections that take into account both relativity from Einstein and quantum mechanics from Bohr and Heisenberg and others. And it is only thanks to these two that we are able to build these marvelous systems that help tens or hundreds of millions of people every day in their lives. Uh, and still, both of those scientific um, complexes, theories, and their experiments and the engineering implementations are incomplete. We know that those parts that we use are true and they are working. We trust them and we can, but their boundaries are porous, and mystery is able to intrude and better our vision. The more we focus, the more we see, as in medieval maps that had in large type, or well, actually handwriting, hic sunt leones, here be lions or dragons even.
Yeah.
And for us, those mysteries are represent an attraction that we cannot resist, but they are also, of course, dangerous, and that is part of the fun.
Yeah, I don't know if it's always fun though, David, because I always say don't get your PMS mixed up with your GPS. So you ever get in a car with these people who insist that you have to. I wasn't driving, and my friend and I have driven this trip for years, and it takes 1 hour. And one of our passengers insisted, no, we have to use GPS. And it took 2 hours. And I was just rolling my eyes, and we got there on time because we give ourselves a 2 hour, time period. But I didn't want to say anything. But there's these people who insist, oh no, I don't care if you've been doing this route for 20 years. This will tell us better than your route because this tells you of a trap. And nope, I just rolled my eyes and said nothing. I just zipped it. But in the future trips, when I have it with my regular partner and he brings a guest, I'm gonna say, dude, I'm not going to go other than our regular route. Sorry. So, anyways, that leads me to one quickie tangent on our truth, exploration. The historian Shelby Foote, a fact is not a truth until you love it.
And he's a historian, so he is probably looking at facts that represent cultures, that represent uh, tenuous ways to understand the daily lives and important decisions of societies, civilizations, leaders, or everyday people. And I am not a historian, and I'm sure that if you asked 10, 8 would say, oh, you have to be objective. You cannot be attached to the
Yeah.
subject that you study. And the two, like your guy who say, no, you've got to love them, those are the best.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that really tell exciting stories and are able to make their subject be interesting and exhilarating for their readers.
Very good, David, because a lot of people diss that Shelby Foote quote. They just go, no, that's not true. So I like you opening up a bigger portal of discovery there. So I see you got a lot of books in back of you. This is Chomsky's quote on science. We learn more about ourselves from literature than from science. Any comment?
So, the books go 360 degrees, by the way, all around me. And as such, I definitely subscribe to the fact that literature is a source of inspiration and self-discovery, and literature is necessary for a fully formed life. Um, I also had the privilege of meeting Chomsky maybe 15 years ago, uh, and love some of his ideas, and definitely not others. He has also been fortunate that probably his realization that one of his most important ideas has been falsified is diminishing because of his age, or if not, I wish him that um, courage and that strength to still understand that his contributions were important regardless. But you know, I'm okay for some people to feel that way.
Yeah.
Their way of living and their way of discovering the world is such that they learn more from literature than from science. That is fine.
Yeah.
I have nothing against it, as long as if someone says the opposite and they say, no, listen, dude, I learned from science so much, and yes, I did read, I'm not a dork. I read books of fiction and literature, but they didn't give me as much understanding of the world. Well, let's not disrespect that path either.
Yeah. It's sort of back to that Faulkner again. Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. And you brought up Umberto Eco, who learned a lot from Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. And here's McLuhan in 69 saying in his book Interior Landscape, that's the inner, not the outer, the inner, the interior landscape. James Joyce has solved numerous problems which science has not yet formulated as problems.
I love it.
I'm glad you're laughing, David. That's what we're here for. That fun. Yeah.
I
Any thoughts on
love it.
that?
Well, why not? Why not? I mean, there are so many incredible authors that have a way with language that is powerful. I love Raymond Queneau, the French author. Zazie
Yeah.
is one of his most famous novels. Stanislav Lem,
Yes.
according to many, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, science fiction authors ever, uh,
Yes.
wrote beautifully about fables, fairy tales told by robots. And
Yeah.
and they are so joyful and so playful with language. Another one that comes into my mind is Jorge Luis Borges,
Oh, yeah.
and his explorations, erudite but beautifully crafted, rich, but not baroque, not
Yeah.
excessive, not self-indulging. So I absolutely um, allow for these and many others to create visions through their work and art that can be proven scientifically after the fact. And as a matter of fact, there is an entire genre, scientific fiction, science fiction, sci-fi, is about inventing new worlds that don't exist but are plausible, and uncountable uncounted engineers are inspired to make those things into reality, whether it is the tricorder from Star Trek that diagnoses anything about you and your state of health, or the humanoid robots that we saw in Star Trek. And now, this year and next year, they are becoming reality. Um, these are simple examples of how literature and movies have created a vision of the future, and then we make it real.
Yeah, that's called effects precede causes. It's what Edgar Allan Poe invented with the detective novel Reasoning Backwards. Because in 39 in New York World's Fair, we had what we're on right now, television, telephone. The same year Finnegan's Wake came out, 39, we were Zooming at the New York World's Fair, but it really didn't become a reality until the movie 2001, when the guy calls his daughter from the spaceship and wishes her a happy birthday on Zoom.
Yes.
Then Aretha Franklin singing "Who's Zooming Who" before we all became addicted to Zoom. And so that's effects precede causes. But two more on science in Onward and Upward. This is the French archaeologist historian. Science finds no truths. It discovers unknown facts that can be interpreted in 1,000 ways.
Well, um, there are multiple ways of creating consistent and coherent systems that match facts for sure. And so you can ask yourself, uh, facts are fine, but are these systems that we call theories real too, or they are arbitrary? And I don't think they are arbitrary. The fact that multiple theories can satisfy a given set of facts doesn't diminish from their value. And uh, we have multiple layers in science and mathematics. If we are looking at those theories and look at not one or two but millions of them, then those are potentially the facts of other theories interpreting them, right? And this kind of understanding in many layers of how you can explore the world is useful.
Yeah.
We are actually building new kinds of truths, new kinds of facts that didn't exist in the world before, um, incontrovertible and impossible to deny to degrees that were not available to us previously through our diligent understanding of mathematics. And there will be consequences. You and I hopefully will be talking in 10 years, and then it will be easier to recognize how novel these kinds of truths are. And let me tell you, I just whispering the word, and then let's take note and meet in 10 years. Bitcoin is a kind of truth that didn't exist in the universe, and now it is becoming available and understandable to more and more people. And from a mathematical point of view, it belongs to a new category that will be the scaffolding of the world that we build. And in 10 years from now, it will be easier to understand what I'm saying. Let's not waste time today.
Yeah. Amazing. So let's end the science diversion here. Really fun, David. You're a brilliant thinker and you're so articulate and concise. Back to Einstein. Albert said, religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame. Any comment?
So I am happy to swap out the word. Uh, Religion is a dangerous word because too many people fall into dogmatism when
Yeah.
they encounter it. So let's um, maybe use uh, uh, a feeling of mystery or magic, even more
Okay.
audaciously. Let's
Yeah.
say magic, right?
Yeah.
So the the magic that works is the magic that is based on science. That is what
Yeah.
Einstein is saying. If you base your magic on the science, oh my God, it will work. It will work every time. And you can inspire, you can exhilarate, you can enthrall people to believe in what you say because your magic is based on science.
Yeah.
And then what he goes on saying is, but if you don't believe in magic, what is your science for?
Yeah.
If you don't use your science to inspire, to build visions of mystery and unknowns to explore, if you don't understand that the world is unbound of incredible discoveries yet to be made, then your science without magic is sterile.
Yeah. Well, this is Michael Apted, the film director. 40 years ago, I asked him, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know that Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922, but it flourished in 80 with the beginning of MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. So Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So, David, I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
One of my favorite images is a subordinate that has the courage to go to Napoleon, tap him on the shoulder, and say, Sir, I'm afraid to tell you, but when you say you can multitask and can do 8 things, all of them at the same time, you are deluding yourself. And if you insist, you're going to lose the Russian war.
How
And,
wait,
and
how
it
do
didn't
we know,
happen.
David? How do we
It
know?
didn't happen.
But how do you know? How did you come up with that story? That was made up by some writer?
No, 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 no. I just made it up.
Oh,
I just made it up.
you
Yeah,
made
because
that up.
because
Okay.
we love to tell the absurd story
Yeah.
that Napoleon was a genius and he could multitask and do 8 things at the same time. And we have proof that it is bullshit because he lost the Napoleonic Wars.
So you're saying other people have hoiked that up about Napoleon in books or whatever.
Or,
They
or maybe he was convinced of it, and no one had the courage to go and tell him,
right.
sir, don't believe that because it is gonna hurt you.
But
So
you got
so
you have ESP, because the next question I'll ask it, because I don't, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the next question is it literally possible for humans to multitask? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, well, I will answer this and then go back to the previous one. the ability of multitasking is our day-to-day experience, because I'm speaking to you, and hey, I guarantee that my heart is still breathing, right?
That's
Or
right.
j- or just because I am listening to what you say, I don't stop breathing. I
Breathing.
go
Yeah.
in and out.
Yeah.
So the question is not do we multitask, but are there limits to our cognitive ability? And a friend of mine, his name is Baba Brinkman, and he's a Canadian-born uh, rap singer
Yeah.
living in New York, who is fantastic. I I first heard him rapping about evolution, Darwinian evolution, scientific rap songs,
Yeah.
and he's married to a neuroscientist, and she uses him as her experimental subject, and
Right.
they have a wonderful show that they performed off Broadway, and I attended that show where he uh, raps and does some mathematical additions on a whiteboard, and he can do it. And
Yeah.
then he asks the audience to tell him some words that he has to introduce in his rapping,
Yeah.
and then whatever other complications. And pretty soon, one of the things falls apart. Either he can rap, or he can add the numbers, or
Yeah.
do whatever else he's got to do. And that is a very vivid and comically entertaining way of showing that there are very, very concrete limits to what our cognitive or current cognitive abilities are,
Mm.
and that we are biologically unable to overcome them, but it is at the same time important that we do. It is
Yeah.
very important that we do. Now, back to your question, the previous one, we definitely can adapt to attempting to absorb information faster. And we can develop all kinds of little cognitive tricks to achieve that. And I am not saying this in a manner that is definitive, but it is probably coming at a cost of the
Yeah.
depth of understanding. So the speed and the depth are counter to each other.
Yeah.
Um, but if the world, again, given how technology evolves, is changing faster and faster, then we may reach our limits of adaptability, our limits of how we can understand, perceive, interpret the world, and we cannot afford to let it slip. We have to keep up. And
Yeah.
so the question then is, if we are biologically unable to do so, what kind of adaptations are we ready to take on that are non-biological? What kind of interfaces, what kind of implants, what kind of brain computer hybrids we must experiment with and prove that work so that we can keep up. Or
Yeah.
we can say, all right, it was fun, and now it's time for the world to move ahead and we stay behind. That is
Yeah.
also possible. And it
Yeah.
is our choice. And of course, 8 billion people, some of them will say, yep, I'm ready. I want these interfaces. I want these implants. I want to become a hybrid of machine and human.
Yeah.
And others will recoil in horror and would say, "You are crazy. I will
Yeah.
never do that." And I'm happy to have been born at a time where I still have the choice of not doing that and then stay behind. And the conversation and the dialogue between these two groups is going to define the next decade of the century.
Yeah. Wow. Because one person, you really explained that well. One person said, "Well, what about Evelyn Wood's speed reading?" And it's like, yeah, well, you learned how to read faster, but you might not have retained it or got it as deep. And then they call it power browsing. I mean, I want to know about David Orban on computers in quotes, and it goes, whoop, and then it skips all the books that have footnotes. And in the old days, we would go into, well, where did they get this information? You know, David did a podcast and here's a transcript, and it's called power browsing. So I think you spoke well saying what the words limits to multitasking.
Yeah, so we uh, have multiple ways of being, because the same people who train their brain on 15-second or 30-second TikTok videos,
Yeah.
they are the same people who binge watch 8 hours of Netflix series, or call their friends to watch all the Harry Potter movies one after the other, or Star
Yeah.
Wars. So, those who say, "Oh, our attention spans are screwed and we cannot concentrate anymore," and all of us are suffering from ADHD. Well, no, no, because we can also concentrate for extended periods of time,
Yeah.
and we can become obsessed about a problem or a challenge and spend 5 years of our professional life working 15 hours a day to try and solve it and hopefully succeeding. So both modalities exist in many people.
Yeah. This is amazing. Both modalities is really anticipating. Um, what was the motive of the cave artist? Your hunch or guess?
We scribble, children draw. Uh, it is an alternative mode of communication together with speaking and dancing and so many others. And so for cave artists, it was self expression. And then, just as um, the evocative power of all those other ways of expressing ourselves include both how we see the world and how we want the world to be, it is also aspirational. It is um, a way of propitiate. So it is also a prayer. It is also
Yeah.
representing the future as they want it to be, with a plenty and bountiful um, 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 hunt the day after. And so it was all of those things, as well as probably storytelling, entertainment, um, and I would be surprised if it didn't exist. You know how old is art is as old as humanity, just as science and our curiosity. So, if we were in a world where we never found cave art, I would be very suspicious. I would be really flabbergasted by its absence.
Yeah. David, I asked for 90 and we got about 10 more minutes. Can you go a little longer, 5 or 10 more, or you got to end in 10?
I can go longer.
Okay, let's just go another 10 over that. But I really appreciate this because you brought up a lot. One person said recently the motive of the cave art was list making. This whole phenomenon of humans making lists, like grocery lists, and then, that whole history of all the important thinkers who made lists, Leonardo, Ben Franklin. So, this whole thing of list making.
Here is another one. It could be also a way of teaching, of
Yes.
transmitting
Yeah.
knowledge, of kids sitting in the floor and some elder hunter showing them those paintings, and then in our disrespectful ways, we think they were grunting the lessons of the day rather than speaking, right?
Yeah. Well, this is McLuhan in 57. It's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. So that's basically the question, the difference between education and entertainment. But let me just suss out his quote. This distinction merely relieves people of the responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other pleases. However, it's always been true whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So that's basically, I'm after the difference between education and entertainment in this thought of whatever pleases teaches more effectively. One guy threw a wrench into it and he says, no, whatever displeases teaches more effectively. So, any thoughts on that?
Anyone who has a child realizes how important it is for the child to find an inspiring teacher.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter the subject, uh, they will be drawn to it and they will excel in that subject, not because of their talent, but because of their desire to make sure that they deserve the teacher they found. And the teacher will be entertaining, informative, um, and they will be respected. They will expect performance, and the children in the class will want to work hard, and the class will never be boring. It's
Yes.
always going to be interesting and challenging and informative, and they will learn 100 times better than not with a very down to earth, disciplined, but uninspiring teacher that is incapable of being engaging and entertaining. So I very, very much agree. School and learning and education should not be about uh, eh, irregimenting the pupils. It used to be, and it was definitely when it was invented. Universal education was about making sure that the basic set of knowledge was made available to those who then needed to be employable. Um, until uh, universal education, reading and writing was necessary to only a few, and only a few would be able to read and write. Um, there is a castle a few hundred miles from where I am right now, and I visited it close to the border with France. And there are all kinds of scribblings on the wall at the entrance. And I told our guide, why is the wall so dirty? You either clean it or you keep it safer. And he's, and the guy said, you are mistaken. These scribblings are from 500 years ago, when the owner of the castle would proudly invite his guests to sign their names, because he was um, so happy that they could read and write, and he was proud about that fact. It was so unique and exotic that someone in the noble class could read and write. And today, you can be the best candidate to a job,
Yeah.
passing all kinds of filters, and you sit down, they give you the employment contract, and you sign with an X, and they look at you and say, "What's going on?" "Well, I'm an analphabet. I cannot read and write." It doesn't matter how good you were until then. It is impossible for you to be hired. So
Yeah.
we have achieved that result. Everyone can be expected to be able to read and write. Fine. That's good and that's great and that's necessary. But that doesn't mean that education should be about this industrial production of employable people. That shouldn't be the point. And too many not understand that and want a school that is about discipline and order and all the testing bullshit is horrible.
It is. You really evoked, but one of my favorite little stories is we went to Graceland, Elvis Presley's, home, and there's a rock fence around the whole place, and every rock has scribblings on the rock. People have left little messages, like the guy at the castle, and one of them said, "Elvis never did drugs."
All right.
But you touched on a lot of what Marshall did in his book called The City as the Classroom. And he was coming from the museum without walls, the center without margins, that we can learn from everything. And, that goes back to, you want to learn gardening, then you go hang out with the local farmer and gardener. So this is that whole thing of education pleasing, really well put. And it's like this both modalities you brought up. And Winston Churchill said, "We shape our buildings, then they shape us." And again, Marshall so brilliantly said, "Well, I'm going to reword it. We shape our tools, then they shape us." And then on his Marshall put out like a rock and roll album, Medium is Massage, in the late 60s. You can hear a parrot in the background saying, "We ape our tools, then they ape us." So even taking it one step further. So this whole idea of we shape our tools, then they shape us. Any thoughts on that aphorism by Marshall?
And the simplest confirmation that comes into my mind is a disappearing sign of someone who uses a pen or pencil to write because they will have a little bump in their middle finger as they press the pen against it.
I got it right
Yep,
there. There's the
that's what I'm
bump.
talking about. That's what I'm talking about. And people who, for example, like me, hold their phone
Yeah.
with their pinky will have something like that on their pinky because the
Yeah.
phone presses against it.
Wow.
So absolutely, this is definitely true.
Yeah. Let's close out with my two oldest questions. 40 years, David. This has really been fun. And really, what I plead is I hope we could do a part three because we still only got to a third. We got another third chunk. So it can be down the line no matter what, but really fun. This is what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Again, I understand how attractive duality is, how polarizing an audience can entice beautiful fights that entertain, but I refuse that one or the other are opposites.
Yeah.
Conviction is a starting point, and compromise may very well be necessary.
Yeah.
There are incredible stories of ultimate self-sacrifice and martyrdom, and they can be inspiring, and they can corral millions of people behind a cause. Uh, but pragmatically speaking, if you had millions of martyrs, you would accomplish nothing. So there can be people, and there are, who stop at nothing and never compromise. And that is fine for them and may be necessary often. But there are people who are responsible for building things in the here and now and bringing forth the vision with an understanding of what needs to be done, and they are not to be diminished in their efforts, looking at what they do as if the compromises that they make are of a lesser value than the uncompromising conviction of the first.
Yeah. Well, that's really good because it kind of goes full circle here because is that, when I ask this question, I go, what's more important, conviction or compromise? It took 25 years before someone went, depends on what you mean by important. So they put the two main topics most people address. There's three main words in the question. They put those aside and says depends on what you mean by important. So here's the double question. Is that question valid, or is it a false dichotomy, or should I do it like what you said in part 1? What is the question I should be asking? Because I will
Yeah.
continue to ask it, but I'm just curious, is there a better wording? Is that a false dichotomy? Is there a better wording to ask that question?
So, first of all, far from me from being uh, such that I should be able to improve your question if it is 40 years that you have loved that question so much. Why should I take the joy of that question away from you?
Yeah.
There's the series Inside the Actor's Studio,
Studio. Oh yeah,
and
I love that guy.
the original
James.
teacher
Yeah.
and conductor that was doing it now passed away, but he had a set of favorite questions that
Yeah.
he would always ask his guests, and half of those questions sucked. They were stupid, but,
I hope the
but
ones I David, I hope the ones I ripped off from him weren't the ones you considered sucking.
but that's fine,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
because
Yeah,
both questions and answers are
yeah,
starting point, are
yeah. That's what I'm saying.
steps in
Yeah,
a conversation, in
yeah,
a deeper understanding. And there are many different ways of asking it, many
yeah.
different ways of answering it. So I really appreciate that you are thoughtful about the questions, and I definitely love better questions more than stupid questions. But at the same time, it is all good. It is
Yeah,
all good because there are too many people who don't even realize how important questions are, and they don't start down the path of questioning the world and questioning themselves.
yeah.
And so, to whatever degree, those like you that enable your guests to do that provide an immense and very, very valuable service,
Well,
and
I appreciate you. Your parents raised you well.
grateful.
you're a polite human and you're articulate and concise, but there are people who attack me on my question. That's a stupid question. No, there's a classic moment in Scorsese's documentary with Elia Kazan. And he goes, blah, blah, blah. And Kazan goes, that's a horrible question. I'm not going to answer it. And then he answers it.
And then, of course, they left both the answer and his
Yeah,
crying out
they left
in
them
the
both
final edit.
in the
Of
movie.
course, they left it there.
Yeah. But is say I mean, I know, but I'm trying to understand false dichotomy. Is saying is compromise what's more important, compromise or conviction? Is that a false dichotomy? Yes or no, kinda. No.
No, no, it is
No.
not a false
Okay.
dichotomy, and let me tell you why. Because
Yeah.
it is everyone's. Uh, Everyone should be free to answer it
Yeah.
in their own way, and so if you answer it your way, and your answer is, for me, conviction is more important, that's your answer.
Yeah.
And if your answer is no, compromise is more important, that's your answer,
Yeah.
and you're entitled to that. You're entitled to be convinced about your answer.
David, one of my favorites was these kids were like 8 and 9 years old. I says, "What's more important, conviction or compromise?" They went, "Those words are too big for us."
A beautiful level of self-awareness.
Wasn't that a beautiful? Anyways, I got to tell the source is Christine McKenna, who interviewed everybody, Herzog and David Lynch for years, and even the Coen brothers in Playboy magazine. And a lot of my questions I got from her, and I've interviewed her twice with some of her own questions. Okay,
That's wonderful.
here's the last one, David, and we'll close out. And can I convince you to do a part 3 down the line somewhere?
Thank you. Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so honored and thankful. Okay, and I'll tell you the history because this is in a sort of a fun way. The question I asked that I got from Christine was, is ambition based more on fear or joy? So I'll just ask that without putting any other comments. And then I'll expand on it. Your answer to that one.
So it starts with fear, and it should arrive to joy.
Yeah. That's the answer I get when I asked it that way, was, "Is ambition based more on fear or joy?" They would just go, "Fear." So, uh, and there were some variations, but and then I read William Friedkin's book, or in his book, came out a couple years ago. He died, I think, a year or two ago. His book came out, and he said, in Hollywood, skill and luck have nothing to do with it. It's all ambition. So people would expand on it more rather than just saying fear or joy, like yes or no. I said, in your accomplishments. So this is one where I actually changed the wording. Sometimes I add the fear or joy later, but now I ask it this way. In your accomplishments, how do you rate these 3 elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Um, Ambition, luck, and skill.
Wow, isn't that amazing? Because I find people are kind of wanting to be humble and they won't say skill first. I also have this thought that because I say luck, skill, and ambition, they just go that order, like it's easier. But then sometimes people say none of those 3. Mine is purpose. Mine is destiny. Mine is persistence, necessity. So why would you rate ambition first? Where'd you get that, David? From the way your parents raised you, or just on your own? Where did you get that drive?
So connecting it to the previous one about fear
Yeah,
and joy, um, a lot of my worldview has been shaped by the fact that my father died a suicide when he was 40 and I was 16. And understanding, decoding, accepting, and then building upon that is a very complex and ever progressing activity. But if you think about it, he basically uh, gave up on life, gave up on exploring, gave up on understanding. And so my starting point is to, in some ways, uh, whether Shakespearean or some ancient Greek tragedy trope, prove him wrong and uh, prove to myself that life is worth living. At the same time, I am also uh, immodest in wanting to uh, be able to accomplish a lot of things. Whatever I accomplished before and whatever I want to build, I tell myself that I can do it. I
yeah,
never, never tell myself, oh, you should be modest and not even attempt that because no one authorized you, no one gave you a license, no one ordered you, no one told you. It has to come from inside, and I build it from inside. I also try to be humble. I recognize that I am not the only one. There are so many other people with the same drive and who are smart, who are persistent and resilient, and I am privileged to be able and associate myself with them, and that is the source of humility in these endeavors. But then I also want and am largely able, I feel privileged because I am able to find joy in the endeavor. I am not doing what I'm doing out of anger or out of spite or out of the drama of whatever trauma that happily at $500 an hour a psychiatrist or psychologist would want to find.
yeah,
I am building the world of for for me, all of us, each of us builds a world that we inhabit. And I am building a world where I want to find beauty and joy. And I am happy when I am able to do that. And I also know that as we go ahead and we eliminate causes of death, of illness, or even accidents, and we are able to live long and fulfilling lives, after a while, stopping that life voluntarily will be the only way.
yeah,
So it doesn't matter if it is 100 years or 1,000 or 1,000,000, whatever the name that we will choose to give, it is what today we call suicide. That is the way that we will
yeah,
say, okay, I did what I needed to do, and now I let the world go ahead without me.
yeah,
So that is a lot of what drives my energy and my explorations and understanding, and it as it is natural, it combines a lot of these things together, and I am happy and privileged to talk with you about it.
David, amazing. You're so articulate and concise and really touches me deeply because Alan Watts loved to quote, it's either Sartre or Camus that said, the biggest question is whether you commit suicide or not. And it's like, well, that doesn't sound like Eastern philosophy, positiveness. But I have to ask, and you don't have to answer, is how long did your mom live or is she still living?
She's alive. Yeah,
Alive. And so
yeah.
did, did
She's
you?
she's 85, or is gonna be 85 next week.
Yeah,
Before we started our conversation, I actually messaged her the URL where we would be
yeah.
speaking. She doesn't speak English, but she likes to watch me on these things because
Watch her
because she
sons.
loves me.
Huge. Yeah, but
Because she loves me.
yeah, but did she? Because she did you get at the age 16 on and pre 16? Did you get this drive for joy and beauty and this humility by the way she raised you?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did it did it blow her out when the husband committed suicide, or how'd she handle it?
Well, they were divorced already. They were friends, but I was born in Hungary and I moved with my mother to Italy when I was 14.
Yeah,
So I would go back to Hungary often to stay with my
I see.
father a couple of times a year, but they were not living together. And it was a huge blow for everyone involved,
Everybody, yeah,
obviously. Everyone.
yeah. So
And
they divorced at what age were you? What age were you when they divorced?
um, so I don't exactly know precisely because he, as an actor, would travel with his troupe, with his group,
Yeah,
all the time. So for me, he would be always somewhere, and then he would come and pick me up at school, and it would be wow, incredible.
right.
But I would say I was 8 when they divorced.
Age 8, yeah.
Yeah.
And did she remarry?
So she had some relationships that didn't gel. And it was interesting for me to meet those men and test them out myself a little bit,
Yeah,
right? Whether I liked them or not, and it never was explicit, of course, but evidently I did that. And then she found a man when I was 12, and she decided to marry him, but waited another couple of years so that I would finish my cycle
yeah,
of school.
yeah,
And so they married when I was 13, and we moved to Italy when I was 14.
yeah. Well, somebody did a great job of raising you and gave you some good genetics too. I mean, you got some good genes. I think you got some good genes from your dad too. There's something about, it's beautiful how articulate you were. And the word luck was funny because you put that as number 2. And I wanted to tell you my favorite is Gary Player, the golfer, said, the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Oh
And I
yeah,
mean, you are very articulate. That's what I like. You're spontaneously shooting out these words, but it seems as though you've thought this all out. And I don't, my big goal, David, is to get people not to use their stock lines. Like
mm,
everybody relies on, well, I've already talked about this, so they use it. And it seems to me that you're being more spontaneous and you're thinking in the moment, you
thank
know.
you, thank you. Well, it depends on the interviewer too, of course, and I love your style. I love your quotes. How you put a mosaic really together, scintillating and stimulating and catalyzing. And for me, it's very enjoyable, and that is why I will be happy to come back. And maybe we will schedule it a year from now, like it happened
Yeah.
between 1 and 2. But we also took note of 1 in 10 years, so maybe that will be part number 4.
I love it. Thank you so much, David. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we keep talking forever and ever. Thank
Me
you. Really honored. Thank you, David. That was super.